Hola, hoy día vamos a invitar a Soli Cooper, que está desde la India, para conversar con nosotros. Good morning here, good evening for you, Soli. Thank you for accepting this conversation with me.
Well, good morning to you.
I would like to put a little context. You are in India now, and far distant from here, you are 10.5 hours ahead of us. But we're all united and together now under the context of the pandemia. So before entering into specifically what is happening in our countries, I would like to give a little context as to what has been happening in the recent years in India. So my first question would be, what has the economy in India been doing in the last 8-10 years, please?
Well, India really started opening up its economy around in about 1991, when we started the liberalization of the Indian economy. Before that, we were an extremely closed economy. We didn't allow imports of almost anything into the country. You couldn't get cars, you couldn't get phones. Everything was closed. In fact, at that time, if you applied to purchase a car, you probably have to wait several years before you actually got it. There was a huge backlog. And from 1991, when we went in for liberalization, there's been a huge change in the Indian economy. Today, we have a population of approximately 1.3 billion people. We have a GDP which is close to about $3 trillion. Unfortunately, if growth rate, which used to be very good up to a few years ago, has sort of petered down. And the not the nominal growth rate, but the actual real growth rate is probably close to maybe 2.53% today. Unfortunately, inflation is running at almost real inflation is running at about 6.5%. Though the IMF version of inflation is about 4.8%. Our unemployment rate is fairly high. It's between 8.5 to 9.5%, which is, I'm talking about pre-pandemic. Post-pandemic, the unemployment rate has skyrocketed to over 27%. And the huge joblessness that this has created, even within the last quarter. Now, the problem is, again, India had been moving away because of the liberalization and actions taken over the last 20-25 years. We have pulled a number of people out of poverty, and we had moved the poverty line, raised a number of people. Unfortunately, again, because of this pandemic, almost 200 million people have moved again back below the poverty line. It's been the pandemic has had an incredibly harsh effect on the Indian economy, and I can explain that a little further if you want, but. The financial system, which had evolved into a fairly complex system over the last several years, that's under a lot of strain today. This is not entirely due to the pandemic. It's been under strain because of extremely bad loans, which have been given over the last maybe 10-15 years by the banks. But this is obviously exacerbated the whole situation far worse. So India, it had become to a large extent a huge manufacturing hub. We manufacture a whole host of things. I mean, everything: automobiles, steel. We are a very large manufacturing sector, and it provides a huge part of our GDP, and that has ground to a complete halt during the last 3 months.
The amount of people that have gone to poverty is really astonishing. Just to give a little perspective as to Peru, New Delhi, I understand, has like 30 million inhabitants. All the population of Peru is 30 million. So if you say 200 million going into poverty, is really an astonishing amount of people going back to poverty.
Yeah, but of course these are estimates. Nobody knows quite exactly, because it's extremely new. These are all estimates based upon calculations made by economists. It's not really, nobody has actually taken clear census of all this data.
Of course. Now, the government, what actions has the government been taken in order to alleviate in the short term, this extreme situation?
There are two aspects to it. One is the public health aspect and the other is the economic impact aspect. The government got a few things right. The timelines which of the coronavirus in India, the first case was detected on the 30th of January. We then had the second and third cases on the 1st of February and 2nd of February. Now, these were all cases of students who came from Wuhan. We, between the 1st of February and the 27th of February, airlifted all our students out of Wuhan into India, which was again a very, very effective step which was taken. By 6th of March, we had started screening all international passengers. Every single passenger landing in India was screened, and if found to be having any symptoms, was sent into a 14-day quarantine. Again, this was a sensible and effective step. By 16th of March, we stopped all travel, international travel completely, and by 22nd of March, we closed down all travel, even domestic travel. So these were effective steps. By 25th of March, we went into a complete nationwide lockdown. Now, for a nation like India to go into a complete lockdown is a tremendously huge step. It's not easy. You must remember that in India, for example, we have 30 million people who are migrant workers. Now, these migrant workers are workers who have come from various states into the more commercially useful states of India. So you have this huge number of migrants who have turned up in states, and a sudden lockdown is imposed with 4 hours notice. Effectively, none of them could go home. Now you've got all these millions of people sitting in a place where they have no job, no income, no home, no food. So this is it's a massive humanitarian problem. The local state governments most of them have been asking for at least running of special trains to take these people back to their homes. The central government, up till now, they have just, since 2 days now, they've actually agreed and started trains to take these persons back. But there's still a large number of migrants who are still there. And that's one of the biggest problems facing India today. This humongous amount of migrants who are sitting in different states, desperate to go home. So many of them are actually walking along highways, walking maybe 1,000 kilometers to go back home, because they just have to be with their families. And today I heard an astonishing thing on television just an hour ago. The state of Karnataka, which had also been asking for trains to take back its migrants to the migrants in its state to its home country. Now, many of these migrants work in the construction industry. And Bangalore, which is our industry, hub of our IT industry, has a lot of construction going on. So the chief minister has actually said he doesn't want any more trains to take back the migrants. In other words, he's almost holding them as a captive there and forcing them to work in the construction industry. Now, I find this mind-boggling. How can it's almost sort of forced slavery? But this is what is happening. So, though the initial response of the government in imposing a lockdown was correct and it was a reasonably early response, it has a huge impact on the economy and the humanitarian aspect, which unfortunately has not been foreseen by the government.
Now, I do not know in India happens what is happening here in Peru, that many people receive work more like on a daily basis. So they do not have much facilities, refrigerators, that they can store food for longer periods of time. So there's always people trying to go to the markets, to the fresh markets, to the open markets. And that's like a source of contamination by itself. Is that something that has been under control in India?
Well, yes and no. In India, you are right. In India too, we have this a large population of the poor employed who literally live on a daily wage laborers who live from day to day, and they don't have vast stores of food. They don't even have many savings. So it's really what they earn, they spend on food that day. And they'd also would go to normally to markets, etc. Well, they've raised it a few days ago in the rural areas, but the lockdown effectively closed down all markets. So you couldn't really go to markets. You could go to places where they were selling food, but markets as a whole were shut down. Now, I agree with you that markets are maybe a source of infection, but in India, you also in the urban centers. Now, I'll give you one example. In Bombay, my city, we have the largest slum in Asia. It's called Dharavi. Now, you have maybe in a area of 500 acres, you have about 1.5 million people living there. Now, if you have this concentrated amount of people, they're living in little shanties and hutments where you may have one room with 5 people living in it.
Sure.
There's no social distancing which is possible.
Of course.
If they step out, they have no toilets in their homes. They sometimes have to walk anything from between 2 minutes to 10 minutes to reach a toilet. So they are going to be stepping out of the house. Now, these shanties are one next to the other. So you're going to have these people stepping out. Nobody can sit in an enclosed room with 4 people 24 hours. So they have all these people are going to be stepping out. Now they have created a containment zone. They say Dharavi is a containment zone, as are several other slums in Bombay. But in these containment zones, social distancing doesn't exist. Exactly. So when we talk about sources of contamination, these are huge sources of contamination, but they're going to take place anyway. There's very little you're going to be able to do about it. So in a sense, unless you allow them to move out, you're going to force them to infect each other.
In terms of providing financial assistance, how has that money flown into the being sent to the different people that needed it?
Well, it's not been done either effectively or enough. The government has been, I would say, almost miserly with the amount that they have distributed. They have distributed about 1% of GDP is what has been distributed as subsidies and as direct benefit transfers to people. And the amounts involved are like maybe 500 rupees, which is $7 worth. You give that, it's peanuts. It doesn't mean anything.
Per day? Per day or per?
No. Just that's it. Lump sum.
Oh,
that's
really?
about what they have. It's pathetic. Almost all economists have been advising the government that they should distribute a minimum of 5% of GDP. Secondly, the government sits, our Food Corporation of India sits on millions of tons of food stock, which we have built, reserves which we have built up. Now, almost every year, a huge amount of that just rots because it's surplus and it just rots away. And we collect more from the farmers and keep them. Now, this is supposed to be a buffer against a famine or an emergency. For some reason, the government has been extremely parsimonious in releasing this. They have released some of it. They should release much, much more. And one of the ministers of the government at one stage said, well, we're keeping it for an emergency. Now, I don't know if this is not an emergency, I don't know what is. So there's not enough food being released, not enough money being released. Now, I understand that obviously the more money you release, the greater your deficit is going to be. But this is a time when we have to go in for deficit financing. We can't possibly, be conservative on our deficits at this stage. So you have to put in more money. There has to be direct benefit transfer to people. There has to be subsidy given to industry. It's impossible otherwise. We've reached a situation today where, but for non-governmental organizations, charitable organizations, organizations like Oxfam and several other Indian organizations and several charities that I personally know, but for them, they're spending a lot of time and effort distributing food, and they distribute thousands of meals every day. But for them, there would be mass-scale starvation in India. Now, this is absolutely unforgivable. It can't be that you have a lockdown and you don't have enough food for people to eat. And the longer the lockdown initially was the right thing. 3 weeks, 4 weeks, it was the right thing. It's almost as if the policymakers don't know what to do. So they simply say, let's just close everything down. Now, you can't build policy on fear. A policymaker has to take into account various things. He has to balance the health of people, balance livelihoods of people, he has to balance the economy, the industry, he has to balance everything and come out with a policy. Unfortunately, our government doesn't have effective policy makers. It's a knee-jerk reaction. It's just born out of fear.
Now, has there been an indication on the part of the government as to how to reopen the economy?
Since the last few days, we have opened up some areas. You see, India has been now divided into what we call zones: red zone, orange zone, green zone. So in the orange and green zones, they have allowed a certain level of industrial activity, which is higher than the red zone. Even in the red zone, they have allowed a very limited amount of activity. It's all in the last few days. And the activity which is allowed is restricted in the sense that, well, if you have an office, you can operate a private office, but with not more than 33% staff. Industries can operate with not more than X number of employees, maintaining social distancing, etc. But the trouble is that most of the commercial activity in the country takes place in what are the red zones, because these are the cities of India. So since you have curtailed those areas, now Bombay is the commercial capital, but it's under a complete lockdown. You cannot even shops are not allowed to open unless they are selling food or essential items. So unless you're really effectively, pharmaceuticals and food are the only things which are open. Everything else is shut. So I can't go to a shop and buy anything. So in that situation, just one thing to keep in mind. In the Indian economy is divided between the organized sector and the unorganized sector, the employment. The unorganized sector is almost 90%. So 90% are the people who are working as construction workers, even self-employed, the small-time businessman, the man who owns his own little shop. This is 90% of our economy.
90
so, of our labor force. So effectively, if that whole sector is shut down, the unemployment shoots up, and all those people who are earning on a day-to-day basis are now sinking into poverty. The other problem is that in India, unlike in many other countries, the government policymakers, prime minister, the ministers concerned, are not coming out openly on a day-to-day basis and giving practical advice and solutions. They don't come out and say, look, over the next 10 days, this is what we intend to do. This is how we intend to try things. They sort of make last-minute announcements without any proper input from anybody, and they don't want to be held accountable. So everything is sort of kept up to the last minute and then just thrown, which is not the way to function.
To be finishing this interesting conversation, Soli, and I appreciate your time. How do you foresee the future? How do you envision the next 15 months, 2 years?
Yeah, it's a good question. I see really three things which are going to happen over the next several months. Oh, by the way, I must say that your finance minister, the young lady who I read has done a really amazing job in Peru. So I don't know whether that's true.
Oh, really? The minister? She's a lady.
Yes, I believe so. It's a young lady of 35, and she's been doing a very good job. So I'm told.
It's of course. And our central bank, I did not want to talk about Peru, but now that you're mentioning it, we have a central bank and a Minister of Finance, which are very competent, and they have envisioned a very good mechanism to deliver liquidity to the companies. And
yes,
to the people.
That's what I was reading that. I was quite impressed with.
Thank you for that comment.
Doing, yeah. Well, I see three really long-term effects. One is that there's going to be a great deal of unemployment even when the economy opens up, because industrial activity has shrunk. Small businesses have shrunk. They are finding it difficult to get financing, to get working finance, to get capital requirements. It's going to be very difficult for them over the next several months, and it may take a very long time for them to recover. Some small businesses which have closed down may not open again. So I see unemployment rising tremendously. People, as it is, having a problem for unemployment prior to this pandemic hitting for the last maybe 3-4 years. This is going to be tremendously exaggerated by reason of this shutdown. That's one aspect. So and that's going to take, in my view, a minimum of 4 to 5 years before we come back to anywhere near what we are today. So we've been set back maybe half a decade or more. The second problem I see is that there will be a certain change in the lifestyle of people. India, since 91 and especially since the late 90s, has started moving in the direction of a more consumerist society. Young people, millennials, etc., have been buying lifestyle products, branded products in greater number, which has created a more booming economy, created a large consumerist base. Now, with this, people are going to start to conserve cash. So I see a lowering of spending on lifestyle, on consumer products.
Of course.
Yeah. So therefore, that is going to come down for a substantial level of time, and therefore that will impact again businesses which deal in such products. The third problem I see is a political and social problem, in that a large amount of power has been garnered and a tremendous infringement on civil liberties and on an invasion of privacy has taken place because of this pandemic. Because there's been a greater monitoring, there's a greater deal of control, and I find that normally any authority, even democratic societies, once they gather power, they're reluctant to give it up.
Of course.
And that's another problem which I feel, especially in India, where we have a government which is instinctively authoritative and instinctively autocratic, though it is democratically elected. I feel that there might be a certain level of reluctance to part with these powers. And so I see in the long term a more authoritarian movement in government, which I hope will be countered by a more liberal instinct of the people, but that is to be seen.
Well, Soli, I really appreciate the conversation. It's been very interesting, and let's hope we can have a chance to chat again at another time. Please stay safe with your family, and thank you for your time again.
Thank you, Yanmi, and you stay safe too.